Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we are back at it with another episode of Double Critical. We were actually not live last Sunday. It was Father's Day and had things to do. It was busy day, but I'm happy to have you guys all with me today. We're going to be talking about Mandalorian stuff. There's a lot of Mandalorian based topics. We've got three TV shows right now, and with more on the way. I mean, we've got Bad Batch going on right now. I'm not going to get into spoilers about any current stuff, so going to kind of leave current Bad Batch stuff kind of to the wayside a little bit more, but I want to focus more on the Mandalorian and the book of Boba Fett. And as both of those are probably be seeing both of those show up again with season 3 of Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett out this December, and I think Mandalorian season 3 coming a few months after that. So we have a very exciting time, and I think there's a lot of things to consider. There's also some stuff I want to talk about too with Lego, and so that is boiling into things, but really from the standpoint of how are these things going to impact gaming? How is with such an increase in Mandalorians, do we think that's going to lead to more factions in existing games and questions along those lines? Now, normally, at this point for like my third episode, it's normally an X-Wing episode, so I will kind of open things up a little bit with X-Wing. We can talk a little bit about huge ships. I'm curious if you're anybody watching, how have you picked up the new Trident class assault ship, Clone Wars era? The big squid ship that has kind of dominated the X-Wing conversation for a while. And if so, what are your plans with it? Are you planning on running multiples? Are you planning on running that and maybe a Sea-Rock for scum lists? Are you planning on doing anything like wild and crazy with that? Or are you just something that you're not into? We've certainly had a big break from news for a lot of games. Legion did just get a bunch of news, but X-Wing hasn't gotten much, and we were supposed to have had the Fury of the First Order officially spoiled and revealed, in a more official capacity. That this was leaked last month, over a month ago, and so now we're we had received word from AMG that they had planned to announce it in June, and here we are, and June is almost over. And we still haven't seen the Fury of the First Order pack for X-Wing yet either, which is pretty interesting. Of course, we do know there's new bombers, the First Order bombers, and then of course the Whisper is going to be in that, the TIE Whisper. So kind of stuff from Star Wars Resistance and stuff from, of course, Episode 9, and it just. It's like X-Wing has a lot of factions. Do they need another faction, right? Do they need a Mandalorian faction? Or should they go a little bit more like sub-factions? Is that something that some of these games should consider doing? I feel like we're kind of getting that way with Legion. And I think that's one of the things I want to talk about today. So hopefully, we'll have some good back and forth. Let me know how you guys are doing in chat, and thank you guys for hanging out this evening. And I want to kind of open things up a little bit with a topic that is something I normally don't talk about, and that is drama, right? A couple of websites have been started reporting early this morning that, oh my gosh, Disney's being like super woke and asks Lego in the latest kind of release of Lego ships to rename the Slave One. And it's not going to be the Slave One. And this is the story that's going out there, right? Like, it's not the Slave One anymore. Lego says it's now Boba Fett's starship. And so and there was like a quote from one Disney executive that said, "Oh, it's not been officially made public. It's not like an official announcement. It's just a term we don't want to use anymore." And so there's a lot of content creators out there who kind of live and breathe on drama and, you know, and all of this, like, we hate like, no, you know, there used to be this expression from back in the day: nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans, you know. And that's I swear I feel like we're going through another iteration of that ever since The Last Jedi, when a lot of YouTube channels that were tiny decided they could do things like, hey, if we hate on Kathleen Kennedy, we can get a lot more views, you know. And granted, I'm not trying to say that, you know, the sequel trilogy was perfect or whatever. Last Jedi and all of those movies, especially Episode 9, they had their issues. They absolutely had those issues. DTLS, Anakin Skywalker, unwilling employee of Watto, right? I mean, honestly, it's funny, but in reality, I try to stay away from a lot of that, like woke kind of discussion and stuff like that, because I have my own opinions, but you guys don't really come to me for politics, so I'm not really going to get too much into that. But I just think it's important to calm down your outrage and let's look at what's actually being said here. And this, because this was spilled over into my Discord this morning, and it kind of got me involved in it, and so I was just like, all right, well, nowhere is it said officially that Disney is renaming Boba Fett's ship. It's still called the Slave One, but the only thing that's official is that the marketing label on the Lego box says Boba Fett's starship. Now, that is accurate. The Slave One is Boba Fett's starship, so it's not like they're lying. The reasoning is quite simple. It's a term they don't want to use anymore. Okay, that doesn't mean they won't use it, but maybe they're just kind of taking a step back from it. You know, I'll be honest with you. I'm a parent. I've got three kids, and we've often read like Star Wars books. What's going on, Jason? What's going on, DTLS? Thanks for joining us. Thanks for hanging out in the chat. But like I've read some of these books, you know, to my kids, and we're going over like all the stuff. I'm like, oh, there's that and there's that, and then we get to like, every time we get to like Boba Fett's ship, I'm just like, there's a little bit of like a sigh before I say its name, just because everything else in Star Wars, you know, well, not everything else. There's bad stuff that happens in Star Wars, but just about everything else is a lot easier and a lot more, you know, easier to digest, you know, as far as kids. And let's be honest, Star Wars is a kids IP. It's Star Wars is for kids, but it's also for grown-ups, but we all were introduced to it as kids, right? So it's not like there's a bunch of like 70-year-old men sitting down and being like, whoa, what's this? The Star Wars. Well, I'll have a look at it. You know, so I think it makes sense for toys for it to say Boba Fett's ship, because a lot more people know who Boba Fett is than recognize the name The Slave One, especially kids, right? A lot of us older fans definitely know the term The Slave One, but I think you're going to reach more people. Marketing-wise, it makes sense. You're going to have a wider reach if you market it as Boba Fett's ship rather than specifically The Slave One. And, of course, yes, the Slave One is just not really a super easy-to-digest name. It's just not. It's not going to mesh well with the way the world is today. That doesn't mean that they're changing the name, though. Nowhere did they say they're changing the name. It's not like you're going to go to like Wikipedia and find out it's like it's actually called the SLV-1. It stands for Super Laser Vehicle or something like that, right? Like it's not like they're changing, like they're not retconning the name. Now, granted, there's a lot of things they might still change the name. Who knows? There's a lot of different ways they could do that. I don't think they'll just go back and retcon it. Now, I don't think they really said Slave One at all, like at least in the films. I think maybe at one point in the Clone Wars did they say it, but you know, I don't think they're actually going to just be like retconning it. I think that there's a chance that they might turn around and be like, either maybe have in the book of Boba Fett, maybe the ship will end up getting destroyed. Maybe he'll get a new ship and he'll have a new name. Maybe they'll address the name for it at one point in the book of Boba Fett. You know, who knows? Who knows? I don't really know. Jason says it definitely makes more sense from a marketing standpoint, considering all the new fan base since The Mandalorian. I agree. And I'm not trying to, you know, hide the fact that yes, the term Slave One is probably stop destroying our Mandalorian ships. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is an old ship too, man. It's been in service since the Clone Wars. Right? The Fire Spray class of ship is an old ship, so it stands to reason. And honestly, if you're thinking about marketing, it's time for him to get a new ship anyway. But you know what I'd love to see? Like a Fire Spray 48 or something like that. Like the same kind of manufacturer, but like a new design. Like kind of keep the same inspiration, right? So like, just like how you have new models of of all kinds of other cars and stuff like that. Like a new Corvette still looks like a Corvette, right? So let's get like a redesign to a Fire Spray and see what like a modern Fire Spray would look like in a Book of Boba Fett timeline. And maybe he's got the money now. He's got whatever, the coffers might not have been that empty in Jabba's palace. So, you're not sure there's a such thing as a new ship in Star Wars? Well, to be honest, like Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, well, at least Mandalorian has been doing a lot of fan service. There's been a lot of old stuff, So what if it's an old ship from the Clone Wars? So was the Y-Wing. Yeah, and the Y-Wing was old, and that's why you don't really see them. I mean, the Y-Wing's got a new version in the sequel trilogy. You got same thing with the X-Wing. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that it has to go away because it's an old ship. I'm just saying, it's an appropriate time, And if the name of it is honestly, the name of it was always a minor problem with me for a long time. But I was always like, it's kind of like Deadpool, right? Like Disney owns Marvel now, and they've got all these Marvel properties. Like, how are they going to do Deadpool? Like, they're working on Deadpool. Like, all right, there's another Deadpool movie in the works, but how is that going to be? Is it going to be a whole lot of F-bombs? Like, I don't think so. So, yeah, it's wow, that's really good. Found a new type of whiskey today called Starward. Pretty cool. Anyway, but yeah, so anyway, I just think that there's a lot of ways that and it doesn't have to be that the Slave One gets destroyed. Maybe he's getting it redone or whatever, getting it re-outfitted or whatever, and he decides to change the name. Maybe Boba Fett goes around Tatooine. He's like, hey, look, I'm in charge of this stuff now, and we're gonna do things a different way, And maybe he, frees any people who are, indentured servants or slaves, to Boba or to Jabba the Hutt that were still working in Jabba's palace. Maybe he lets them loose, and gives them a chance to work and earn their keep by building up the place. And maybe, I don't know. Maybe he does something like that. He's not a terrible guy. Like, he's not a great guy. He's not going to just be like, you're free and here's a whole bunch of credits. Go on your way. He'll be like, no, you're free, but if you're going to stay here and eat, you're going to work. Maybe he's going to put people to work. But at least freeing people. And maybe through doing that, he decides to give his ship a new name. That's a possibility. I mean, obviously it would have to be done with more elegance than the way I just put it out, but that's an idea. So there's a lot of ideas. Maybe the ship ends up getting destroyed, or maybe they just don't talk about the name of the ship at all. Like they never did before, and it wasn't a problem. You don't have to hear. It's not a name I need to see and hear. Maybe it's just something that'll be in the background. Like they usually don't talk about, like, hey, that vessel, that Fire Spray 31 class vessel you've got there. Oh, I'm glad you pointed out that it was a Fire Spray 31. Otherwise, I might have thought that you were talking about a YT 1300 freighter. Like they usually don't get into the weeds about things like that. You're free. By the way, my ship's called the Emancipated One. You're terrible, but that's a little bit funny. I mean, and it's okay to kind of make jokes about this stuff. I think there's a lot about our culture that we can sometimes take ourselves too seriously, and I think it's okay to laugh a little bit. I'm okay with laughing, but in reality, the reason I brought this whole topic up, Disney's not retconning the name. They're not renaming the ship. They're not changing the established canon. They already did that a little bit in Legends. They're not doing that right now. But there's really nothing wrong with the name of his ship. It's imposing, and he's an imposing character. That's a fair point. I think there is a little bit wrong with the name of his ship, though, because Boba Fett he's not a slaver, right? So, like, I don't think it's I don't think it's appropriate for him, and not just in a politically correct sense, but just in a character sense. He's not into that. He's a bounty hunter. He doesn't enslave people. You know, if he was like a taskmaster with a whip and making people like dig in mines or something like that, then maybe, so like I'm also curious because it was called that before he had the ship too. And maybe that's one thing that they're going to do. Maybe they're going to go back into his timeline and kind of explore Django. Like why did Django name the ship the Slave One? Now there's probably a reason for that in Legends that I have not read. It's possible Django never died and was... No, Django died. Oh, that Django was a clone? Oh, you're reaching really far right there. I don't think that that's the case, but hey, man, I mean, that's an idea. Crazy ideas are what Double Critical is all about, right? I have no problem with wild and crazy ideas. So, it is possible. Like maybe Django was a clone. Maybe there's going to be a point where we find out, hey, Django was in cryo sleep this whole time. We know that they can make perfect clones. Maybe they did that, and once the true Django clone was old enough, they aged him up, and all that stuff happened. What was going on up here? What is going on with my lighting? There we go. All right. Interesting. There's interesting stuff going on. But all right, so let's talk a little bit about, because I kind of want to get off of that, but before to wrap it up, the fire spray stuff, it's a merchandising change to basically more accurately reflect a toy and who the toy is marketed to. It's not the collector's version of the Slave One. It's a smaller version of the Slave One, like a cheaper, smaller scale version marketed towards kids. It's not even the version marketed towards adults. So I think it makes more sense to tell young children, hey, this is Boba Fett's ship, because a lot of people might say, hey, wait a second. The Slave One, like that's going to turn off some people. Some people who might have wanted to buy it might see that and be like, oh, you know what? I don't want to buy this. Like, there's probably some people who will do that. I can understand that, especially if you're not a Star Wars fan. Like, if you're not a core Star Wars fan, then I can understand. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start talking about the Mandalorian. We're going to talk about Mandalorian Season 3, what new things we're going to potentially see showing up in our games. We're going to be... Will you do any more Force FX lightsaber unboxings? I have actually an update on that. I'm going to step away for 1 second, and I have kids screaming, and I think somebody ripped somebody's head off, so I'll be right back. Okay, I have saved everybody's lives. Nobody is now, they were wrestling. This is one of the things about being a parent and having lots of kids. They wrestle. I have all boys, by the way. And it was so funny. Like, I go in there and like my youngest is on top of another one, and he's like spanking him. Like, what are you doing? I told you to go to sleep, and here you are. Like, he had him rolled up. Like, this kid's 5, and he had a 9-year-old rolled up, and he's whooping him. And like, I have no idea. How did you do that? I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of proud, but I had to put on the serious face. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Hands to yourself. Get in your bed. Anyway, that's fun. All right, so let's get back on track here. So Deegan asked about Force FX lightsaber unboxings. Yes, there haven't been any that came out recently, so there have not been many to do. The next one, I was supposed to have this one up already. It did not show up yet. I ordered from Dorkside Toys the Ahsoka Tano Clone Wars lightsaber. This one is the one that she uses through her adult year or her teen years in the Force, or in the not the Force FX, in the Clone Wars, and it is a color changing lightsaber, so it's going to be able to be green like she used, and I think it also changes to blue, and it might have other effects too, but we're going to see. So I'll have that one, and then I have the dark saber on pre-order. So when that one comes out, I'll be able to look at that too. Now, I do live in Orlando, and I know a lot of people have asked. No, the Black Series Darksaber is not out yet. I think August. I think we're looking at August for that one. So yeah. So that one's coming out. But now there is Darksabers. There are Darksabers out there now. There are some at Disney. If you go to the Black Spire Outpost, they have a lot of new lightsabers there. Now, I do live in Orlando. I don't have annual passes to Disney, and definitely not bringing the family there. The kids aren't vaccinated yet, and so I don't want to bring the kids to like a super, super heavily crowded place. Can two Mace Windus connect? It's a great question. Well, the Mace Windus don't come with anything to allow them to connect, but if you have Darth Maul's connector, it does fit into Mace Windows, so you would be able to connect to Mace Windows, but it would be a loose-fitting connection. It's not machined to fit into Mace Windows, but Mace Windows does fit for like 1.5 turns. So it's enough in there just to do some demos, but you wouldn't be able to swing them really hard because you'd probably do some damage to the saber. So I wouldn't do that beyond a simple kind of just a quick demonstration like, woo, woo, this looks cool. I wouldn't actually do any like mock combat with them done that way. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about sub-factions. I think this is an interesting thing because we're getting so many Mandalorian stuff. Mando Season 2. If you guys haven't seen Mando Season 2, I'm going to talk a little bit about Mandalorian Season 2 and like kind of where that's taking the show. We don't really know anything about the book of Boba Fett yet, so I couldn't tell you spoilers for that if I wanted to. But I think there's definitely a lot of potential for X-Wing. We know that that the Razor Crest is coming to X-Wing. Do you think Darth Maul's is worth it? It's pretty. Yeah, it's very pretty. But some of the newer ones, if you can get Darth Maul's at the original price, like 120 or 140 or something like that, it's probably worth it to get the two if you can buy them both each. But like the new Force FX lightsabers are like double price now. They're like almost $300 each, and some of them just are not worth it. So, but yeah, all right. So Mando. We've had 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. It's delved pretty deep into Mandalorian culture, and so we're seeing so much more in the way of Mandalorians. And now with Mando Season 3 coming out, we don't know exactly what that's going to entail, but I do feel like they're starting to get very, very close to the restoration of Mandalore and the Darksaber and Bo-Katan and uniting the clans and all of this stuff is kind of like was definitely a focus for everything in Season 2. And that's, or even the first 2 seasons. I feel like the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian were very closely linked. And so we did kind of leave with like the conclusion of the Grogu arc, right? And so like what's next? If Grogu is not, because I don't believe that we'll see Grogu in Season 3. I think we're going to see Mando take the Darksaber, go to Mandalore with Bo-Katan and other Mandalorians and try to unite things. What time is the start, Alejandro? 8 o'clock is where I usually start my double criticals. So you can go back and rewatch, and when you're ready to just click live, you can fast forward, or you can just watch live with us right now. and then rewind, and it'll be on demand. I mean, you can rewatch the beginning if you want. We were just only thing you really missed is we were talking about the drama with the Disney Lego Slave One set, and that they're not actually renaming the ship. They just wanted the box to say Boba Fett's ship, but at the same time, they're not really crazy about that name. So it wouldn't surprise me if that name does kind of just take a kind of fade off into the background, like yes, that's what the name of the ship is, but we don't need to like talk about it all the time. Like there's a lot of things that happen in Star Wars that we don't need to see on screen. We don't need to talk about all the time. Like people have sex, that's how every child is made, but they don't focus on that, so like there are things, there is slavery in the galaxy, especially in the Outer Rim, but we don't need to focus on it as much. They certainly did in Solo, a Star Wars story. There is definitely a lot of things like that. They're just, is it every day? No, I do this usually on Sundays. I do it the first, second, and third Sunday of each month, although I didn't do it last Sunday for Father's Day. And so I probably won't do it next Sunday either, because the next Sunday is the 4th of July. So it's usually Sundays that aren't holidays, but not necessarily every Sunday. We just had a lot of Sunday holidays lately. So, yeah, there will not be a Double Critical next Sunday. So, we might take July off, and I don't know. We'll have to, and I do live streams kind of randomly, periodically. So, it helps if you turn on alerts so you won't miss out on all of that stuff. We just have, why is Slave One an issue? I think it's more about a marketing thing. I think it is. I think you're exactly right. It's more about marketing. You look at Legos, especially this particular Lego set is a smaller, more beginner version of the Firespray 31 class ship known as the Slave One. It's a smaller ship, and it makes more sense to say, like, hey, this is Boba Fett's ship, because you're marketing it towards younger children that are going to be walking up and down the toy aisle, I think it's appropriate. I don't think that's not the time where you want the ship's full actual name. Like it's, especially when it's named, we all know that that's kind of like a borderline, like, ooh, they're kind of pushing the envelope with that name. We've all always known that. This isn't the time to put that on the box. Times are changing. We're more sensitive to these things as a people. And of course, it's because that's what the name is. I'm not, but at the same time, it also makes sense to say, hey, this is Boba Fett's ship. Boba Fett is a widely known character. He's got toys. He's all over the place. He's got his own show coming out soon. So, yeah. You bought rights from Disney to make a non-canon film called Shatterpoint. Well, if you bought, why would you have to buy the rights to do that? I thought that as long as you're not profiting from it, well, good luck. All right. So let's move forward and talk about our tabletop games some more. So we're seeing a lot more. We're seeing a lot more in the ways of our Mandalorians kind of dominating all of TV and all of the current stuff. So I think like Atomic Mass Games taking the mantle of X-Wing, Legion, Armada. We're gonna have to see way more Mandalorians, and so many, in fact, that I think it could inspire some Mandalorian-only game modes. Isn't there a novel already called Shatterpoint? I think there was. I think it was one of the Legends ones, though. So you'll have to keep in mind. So, I think that was a Mace Windu novel, wasn't it? Shatterpoint. So, but yeah. So let's see. I think we're going to see sub-factions. All right, we're starting to see sub-factions in Legion with the Wookiees. Now, it looks like the way that sub-factions are going to be there is that, you've got 2 Wookiee commanders now. You've got a Chewbacca Wookiee commander and then a generic yet unique, Wookiee chieftain. We haven't seen everything that they have to offer yet, but, with all the new Wookiee units, it looks like you might be able to, within the Republic, run maybe a mostly Wookiee build. It remains to be seen if there's going to be the possibility to run an all Wookiee build. A lot of it depends on what Chewbacca has to say, what certain upgrades are there, if there's any rule specifics. Like there may be rule specifics that allow you to run like Wookiees only and no clones. That would be awesome. You know, maybe you just say, all right, I'm running sub-faction Wookiees within the Republic. Maybe there's a way to do sub-faction Wookiees within the Rebels at some point. I don't think that's as thematic, you know, but yeah, I mean, look, I'm excited, but I think the same thing has to happen with Mandalorians, and sooner rather than later. I mean, they're dominating everything. So with Mando, how many named Mandalorians have we already seen? You know, you saw. I think we had the trio. You know, Bo-Katan, Casca Frost, and Axe, whatever his name was. Right, like those three. It helped Din Djarin. But then we had all the underground Mandos, you know, and one of those was of Vizsla. It was a Vizsla guy, the heavy, like the super commando, heavy gunner guy. Right, so you've got all of these named Mandos, but you have also a lot of background and generic Mandos. You had Death Watch kind of show up on screen a little bit too, like in a flashback. So like Mandalorian culture is really gonna. I think season 3 is gonna kick it in a high gear. I think we're gonna see more Darksaber. I think we're gonna see, Bo-Katan and Din Djarin go back to Mandalore. We're gonna find out what the current state of Mandalore is, and it's gonna get real. Like you're gonna have a whole new adversary probably for the Mandalorians to fight. And somebody earlier said they wanted to see Moff Gideon's cruiser as an epic ship in X-wing. I think it's a fantastic idea. You know, and it's one of those things that's often referred to as Moff Gideon's cruiser, or an Imperial light cruiser. Not once have I ever heard it referred to as an Arquitens class cruiser, right? And this is one of those instances where some things can have multiple names, right? And I'm sure that ship had its own title too. Like Moff Gideon wouldn't have had a generic ship. He would have been on a ship that was called like the Tormentor or the Crusher of Souls, or something like that, right? The Shatterpoint Disaster, you know, or something. He would have it. Oh, the Darksaber Carrier, right? Like that would be really cool. We should come up with some more really cool like names for Moff Gideon's, and I'm sure it wasn't like the Moff Gideon flagship. No, you know. And I wonder if he had other ships too, because like I want to go back to that episode with the Gazanti that was on there. It was like we have to rejoin the fleet. I'm pretty sure he said rejoin the fleet. I'm like, it's one capital ship does not a fleet make. You know, I don't know about that, but I think we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see, I think between X-Wing and Legion, I think was where we'll see most of our Mandalorian-based content. Armada would be tough. We need to wait for Decipher to start making Star Wars card games again. Oh, that's how I got into so much of my Star Wars like technical stuff, was reading all of the descriptions on those Decipher cards. I'm like I learned stuff about like the Blastech E11 and all of these freaking like, oh, I know the nomenclature for Hans DL44, all this other stuff now, you know. You learn way more, and how I really would love to talk to somebody who worked for Decipher back in the day and like interview them and be like, hey, how much of this stuff did you guys just pull out of your ass, and how much of it actually came from Lucasfilm, or was there like a combination? Like, I think this droid should be R5CX, you know, and his backstory is that he once served pizzas to Jabba the Hutt, but was thrown out for having, you know, not enough frog limbs on Jabba's favorite birthday pizza, and was then picked up by a stormtrooper and brought aboard the Star Destroyer. Like, you know, like just ridiculous amount of, I don't know. But Decipher had a lot of that. I think actually they did the same thing with the Star Trek card game. I believe there was one bridge officer for this Decipher Star Trek card game who was actually like the niece or something like that of one of the developers for the game, and so they said like descendant from ancient game developer or something like that. So I thought that was kind of fun. Like a family member, you know, shows up in there and you're working on the game with them in it. JJ, what's going on, JJ? How you doing? Hopefully having a fantastic end to a great weekend, and I'm doing pretty well, and you know, having a good time. So yeah, I think we've seen a lot of. Let's talk a little more about X-wing. You know, I do want to say we are seeing some new. I don't want to do too much spoilers, but if you're caught up on the Bad Batch, you will have noticed there's a lot of stuff, a lot of ships that are either new or just simply haven't been made for X-wing yet that need to show up, and some that are new also. So, like, we got really good looks at some really cool ships in the Bad Batch, and there are ships I'm like, okay, I can't wait for this one to come out. Can't wait for this one to come out. You know, and so that much is exciting. I think like our modern TV shows are providing a lot of content for that. So I think that's one of the bigger pushes between that and of course the Razor Crest coming out. And that's another thing too. Mando is probably going to have a new ship next season, right? And like here is and I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you. I kind of laughed my butt off because the episode of Mandalorian, again, I told you we're going to spoil seasons 1 and 2, right? But the episode in season 2 when the Razor Crest gets destroyed aired like days after the HasLab $500 Razor Crest funded, right? So after they collected all of those pledges for like this beloved iconic ship, they destroy the ship and like, oh, it doesn't exist anymore, but we got your money now. I was like, I'm so glad I didn't back that. Because I don't have any room. I mean, the thing is, like, it's massive. The Razor Crest. I don't know if you guys have seen the Hasbro Razor Crest. It's for the 3 3/4 inch ship figures, but there is a new HasLab project in the works. But they said it's not going to be a ship, which means it's probably going to be a Rancor. That's my guess. Is that the HasLab project will be a Rancor? That one I'll have a harder time not backing because Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie. Just so you guys know, I absolutely love Return of the Jedi. Always have, always will. It's the first Star Wars movie that I remember actually watching, like from beginning to end. I have some very early memories of Episode 4. Like I didn't watch Empire Strikes Back until I was older and could actually understand it and process it and be like, wow, this was a really good film. But Return of the Jedi, despite all the criticism that it got for having Ewoks and whatnot, was always my favorite, because it was the first, and it was, and it had that amazing space battle. It's where B-wings came from. It was, it's like there's so many, all of the fleet based stuff. Like, that was our fleet game, right? Like that's where Armada came from, right? Well, I mean, and to be honest, Armada also came largely from the Clone Wars battles too, and of course the old classic PC gaming, Empire at War is huge for creating Star Wars Armada. So yeah, so now I think Armada being my favorite game of all time, is going to have a harder time coming up with new things from Mandalorian so far. So it's possible we'll see like a blockade. Well, maybe we'll see some more New Republic things. Maybe we'll see some remnants of the Empire ships. There's definitely the opportunity to see more Imperial ships. I would love to see the Arrestor cruiser that was briefly, tinily in Solo, a Star Wars story. Like I would like to see like a version of that kind of done up for the big screen. I'd love to see an onager on camera, and even things that could just fuel additional cardboard update packs for Armada. But I think Legion is one that really has a lot to gain from these shows, an awful lot to gain. And so, like, Din Djarin, we need the Mandalorian, we need Cara Dune, we need Fennec Shand, we need Boba Fett, updated Boba Fett, Bo-Katan. We need all of these characters to show up because they all are absolutely viable. And one of the cool things about this show and about these shows is they don't heavily feature lightsaber wielders. Now, I love lightsabers, no question there. But Legion is more of a shooting game than a sword fighting game. So it certainly has its fair share of lightsaber users, but it's at its core, it works. It's designed mostly to be a shooting game that has some ancillary, lightsaber combat too. That happens to be kind of a nice like frosting on the cake. But Mando and presumably Book of Boba Fett are going to really like seem like they're, all of the lore and everything surrounding that is just perfect for Legion. There is melee combat, but there's also heavily focused on ranged combat, and it's just going to be beautiful. So I think we're going to really need to see a Mandalorian sub-faction. And it's interesting to me because we might not see only one sub-faction. I can see, different houses and clans, having like rogue or what was the, for those of you who are up to speed, what did they call Din when he met Bo-Katan and stuff, like those, the Children of the Watch or whatever, like that, all these, factioned or segmented Mandalorians, and maybe the leader decides what faction you're going to be. If Bo-Katan is your leader, then you're going to get like this, and it becomes kind of like a Marvel Crisis Protocol thing where your leadership ability on your leader kind of helps define your army's special function, and like that would be a really cool thing to happen. Alejandro says, baffles me that Return of the Jedi is still the only major space battle we see in Star Wars outside of Episode 3, which is Obi and Anakin focused, and then Rogue One, which is cool but much smaller in scale. Now, yeah, I'm really surprised we haven't seen more large space battles. I mean, from a certain point of view, Episode 9, I have to throw that out there. They tried, and I certainly was really excited when they first gave us that preview of like, look at all these ships in Episode 9. Most of them you're not going to see for more than just a split second in that one scene. Like you had all. That's what killed me with Episode 9, right? A foundling, yes. Thank you, Jason. But like Episode 9, like you had all of these ships. Like, and it's amazing the amount of capital ships they threw. And all they were was wallpaper for the background while Poe was in his X-Wing. And it was so disappointing. It's so... Like, it could have been amazing. I need the Snyder cut of Episode 9. I need to see that battle. I need... Like, think about this. Imagine... You're a Bothan captain, and this isn't really a rant. I'm not trying to be hateful because I'm very grateful. I enjoyed all of the Star Wars movies, some more than others. Even the sequel trilogy, while it wasn't perfect, I still love the opportunity of being able to go to the movie theater and watch a new Star Wars movie. It's one of the greatest feelings that this life can offer you, and I stand by that decision. Even if the movie ends up not being that great, it was still great. Like a bad Star Wars day is better than a good other day, and that's my opinion. However, we'll come into this thing. Imagine you're like some Bothan captain and you've got yourself like a nice like MC-75 or an MC-80 or something like that, or one of these variants, like nice huge warships, like relic of like, hey, we're galaxies at peace now with this ship. You know what? It's okay. We're going to use this ship as a trade vessel, and it's going to be kind of like a remote hospital. We still got some turbo lasers. We can still fight, but I'm doing my thing. I've got my trade, my shipping route. We're providing security, against pirates and all this other stuff, and I've got this great, we get the call. Lando's sending out this message. We need to go stop the Emperor's fleet. The Emperor's back. What? We got to put everything on hold. They're summoning everybody from the galaxy. And that was what I wanted. I definitely, like, if you back and watch like a lot of old videos of mine, after Episode 8, but before Episode 9, I was sitting there holding out hope that we were going to see some kind of call, some kind of desperate call for all the ships of the galaxy to come together. Like all the scrubs and beyond. Everybody, like from freighter pilot to warship pilot, to pull everything they had and the galaxy to come together. We don't need the rebels to fight for us. We don't need the resistance to fight for us. We're all going to stand up and fight. And I wanted that to happen. So I was glad that it kind of happened. But then the delivery of showing us that was what failed. Because like all these ships show up, then there's the lightning, and then it comes back on, and then everything just crashes. Right? I'm like they don't do anything. You have a 20,000 capital ships in the sky. And nobody fires a shot. They're just there to to paint the sky black with ship hulls. Episode 9 could have had an end game moment. Wow, well said. Well said. No, yeah, and so it all could have been much better, but it's okay. And here's something else. Since we're kind of we're talking about the films a little bit now, and this one's kind of informal. I'm gonna wrap this up a little bit earlier tonight, but I want to close out on talking about this a little bit. I feel like we're entering a period where that we've seen before. History repeats itself sometimes. And this isn't a bad thing. It's a little predictable, so it can be a little frustrating for me, but it's okay. The prequel trilogy had a lot of similar feelings. People were not happy. People, dug into the details, and I have issues. I still have issues with the prequel trilogy as shot, in that it did not portray Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship in the way that it was kind of set up in the classic trilogy. You never really got the idea that they were friends. You never really got the idea that Obi-Wan just took it upon himself to train Anakin. No, you were kind of forced to. So all of those things that Alec Guinness says to Mark Hamill in those movies, in the classic, in the Star Wars trilogy, about his relationship with Anakin. All of that was completely thrown out when they made the prequel, and they just came up with a whole completely different story. And that was my big criticism for the prequels. And it took the Clone Wars animated show to kind of breathe new life into the prequel timeline and make people fall in love with the prequels and that timeline and that era and those characters and your Mace Windu's and your Aayla Securas and your Plo Koons and all of those characters and such. And so that was really important, because now, after having the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels to an extent, and then Bad Batch and all this other stuff, if you go back and you watch the prequels again, it won't be with such it won't be like a negative experience for you. It'll be like, oh, look at that. Oh, there's Aura Singh, and all these other little things that you're going to see. And so I feel like that was a very valuable contribution, and we are now entering the beginning of that period for the sequel trilogy. What I mean by that, the High Republic, it's a whole different timeline. And I, you may have heard about it. It's this book initiative. I waited a long time after it came out. I read the first High Republic book, Light of the Jedi, and I didn't want to read it. I had pre-ordered it, and then when it came out, I was like, I'm not going to read it. So I finally got around to reading it. It was amazing. It was really, really good. I'm not joking. It's in my top 5 Star Wars books of all time. It's up there with Thrawn. It's that good. The Light of the Jedi I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I read another one, Into the Dark. One was not as good, but it wasn't terrible. It was kind of in the middle. It was okay. It was a solid book. It was more of a young adult kind of book, so it wasn't like as hard hitting, But anyway, here's the point. The High Republic is a big major initiative. Almost everything in the High Republic has something that indirectly is helping world build for the sequel trilogy. Just little bits here and little bits there. Little bits. Just little bits. Like, for example, and there's just a little. One of the books talked about this base that was an old Amaxine warrior base that they found, like this ancient, and that was a big centerpiece for this particular story arc. Okay. Well, the Amaxine warriors are kind of what's the right word? In the book Bloodline, Leia is kind of coming to, it's all about Leia and her founding the Resistance. Well, they do battle against some Amaxine warriors that were kind of like the arrowhead for the First Order trying to push their way into the galaxy. So the Amaxine warriors were allied with the First Order and all of that, and they introduced them there. So I feel like all of this little stuff, like they're dropping all these breadcrumbs that are like going to plant the next generation of fandom with all of these seeds that are going to make the sequel trilogy feel more rich and full. And that's a tall order, I think, to get all of that done. So And that's kind of one of the things that we're entering right now. You're going to see, and we've already seen some of that with The Mandalorian also. There's like all the cloning chambers. We're seeing a lot of things like, oh, is this Snoke's origin? I'm getting really tired of every single cloning vat we see everywhere being like, is this Snoke's origin? You know, there's a lot of cloning in Star Wars. It's not just Kamino. It's not just Snoke. There's a lot of cloning. So anyway, I feel like we're getting into that era where they're trying to start filling in the gaps of the sequel trilogy and making it better. So maybe in about 15 more years, we'll look at the sequel trilogy with like more loving eyes. And I think that's possible. It's not an easy task to do. But either way, I'm going to wrap things up. I want to thank you guys for watching with me. Thanks for hanging out. This was a little bit different because we normally don't talk regular just Star Wars stuff in general, but it all ties into our board games. It all ties into our tabletop games. The more stuff we see on TV and in books, and I would love this. We could do a whole book episode too. If you guys haven't, I recommend the High Republic, at least the Light of the Jedi book. If you're an Armada fan, there's a really great space battle stuff. There's a lot of Armada stuff in there. There's a lot of stuff for all the games. But I also definitely recommend all of the Thrawn books, especially the most recent few. It's a lot of the Chiss Ascendancy, and it's amazing. All right, you guys, I'm going to thank you for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are amazing. Thanks for making this another great episode of Double Crit. I will talk to you guys later, and as always,